Assalamu alaikum, fam. Hope you're doing well. We're continuing our reading of the Federalist Papers. It is highly educational. We learned quite a bit from Alexander Hamilton, and we're still continuing the same subjects, which were just, how you deal with the military, how you deal with the Union, and then I'll show you his catchy titles, right? The idea of restraining the legislative authority in regard to the commission defense considered. So, he's got the best titles. Let's begin. Okay. Essay number 28. If, on the contrary, the insurrection should pervade a whole state, or a principal part of it, the employment of a different kind of force might become unavoidable. So here, what do you see? If the people have revolted to such a size that they've taken a significant portion of the state or a whole state in general, that's when you're going to have to consider what we're going to do here, right? It appears that Massachusetts found it necessary to raise troops for suppressing the disorders within that state. That Pennsylvania, from the mere apprehension of commotion, so they're like, hey, they're very disturbed. What's going on over there? They're not too happy, right? Among a part of her citizens, has thought proper to have recourse to the same measure. Suppose the state of New York had been inclined to establish her lost jurisdiction over the inhabitants of Vermont. So lost jurisdiction, the part that has put itself into rebellion. Could she have hoped for success in such an enterprise from the efforts of the militia alone? So here he's getting at, could a militia alone fix what has happened in a rebellion in that area, or sufficiently protect an area? He's getting at, no, you would need to get the bigger forces in line. Would she not have been compelled to raise and to maintain a more regular force for the execution of her design? So here, what is he getting at? More regular force. So a militia is called upon in times of need and distress, right? And that's more small and in different pockets. Whereas a regular force is something that is consistently maintained, larger numbers, it's got more logistics, National Guard, essentially, right? If it must then be admitted that the necessity of recurring to a force different from the militia, in cases of this extraordinary nature, so here he's getting at extraordinary nature, so he's kind of reminding us that this is supposed to not be something because the leaders of each state, the governors and the president, are supposed to maintain unity, not cause division, factions. They're supposed to kind of, keep the people motivated to stay within the union. Whereas today, you have people really balkanizing the country, separating people on gender, race, ethnicity, religion. It's all about how can we get each other mad at each other, and how can we make each other hate each other, to the point where people are even separating based on vaccine status. And that is truly tragic, because it's really getting each other to this hatred. And it shows you, how the politicians in the 17th century, how different they are from the politicians of today. Cori Bush, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib. These are hyper-partisan, hateful people who hate this country and hate half of the farmers and people who don't live in the urban cities, right? Highly corrupt, And then you have other fat cats in red states as well who talk and, like Marjorie Taylor Greene is a bit nuts and gets too involved in different fake FBI groups and just really leads people into a very dark road of rabbit holes. So today you can see how it's so partisan that you're like, this is really tragic. So you had, for example, let's follow me here on this thought. You had Trump, who he was divisive. He was loved, but he was also heavily hated. Then you have Biden, who's hated and despised and has to have the media create a fake reality. So you have people very resentful about that. And when Trump got elected, censorship went so full blown that it was insane, you know? And now, more than ever, people are at each other's throats. Almost like a second civil war is on the way. So when he says extraordinary cases of a militia being called for to suppress a certain area, now it's like you see Portland has Antifa going riots, and then you have the media lying about it's mostly peaceful. You have people angry at the defund the police movement because it's leaving regular citizens to be subjected to. So you hear talks of cessation now. You hear Florida, Texas, parts of Idaho, Ohio, people are saying we should secede. Even certain Californians say we should separate, right, from Northern and Southern California, or at least have our own way. Silicon Valley, posh, uber wealthy, soy boys in the city really have a lot of disdain for the country people and the farmers who grow their food and provide all that organic stuff they like to buy in Whole Foods and stuff like that. This tension is growing. So you hear now more calls to split. And I think that it could be done and it would destroy our country. But we're getting to a point where the left denies social, cultural issues and thinks only economics is important. And the right has only focused on the social and not taught people the economics of it, how to start a business, how to take advantage of capitalism and the free market. They've kind of just stuck on very small issues and have become weaker and weaker. Whereas the left has become more militarized and jackboot in this way. So you can definitely see how maybe back then it was extraordinary in nature, as he says, but today it's plausible. I mean, Tim Pool, he is somebody who I like, but he's constantly droning on about civil war. But it can happen, man, because people get frustrated. They get tired of censorship. You can't even speak free on Facebook. We're having, the media create an entirely fake reality, open slander, open libel, and people are feeling like they're pressured up, like they can't even be free. They're having medical experimental stuff forced on them. They're being divided. They're not being able to travel. They're being isolated. They're being mentally abused by having their businesses shut down and not being able to travel freely. And it's really put so much strain on people's ability to love their government. Because remember, Hamilton wanted the people to get along with the government, right? He wanted peace and tranquility and order and efficiency. Today we have something much opposite. We're oppress the people, do whatever we want, silence dissent, and it's more jackboot and then more of a mockery. More of whoever doesn't agree, mock them and call them our buzzwords so that they can be publicly shamed, which is not something that creates unity but animosity. So you can see how the ideal politician should be and how the founding fathers wanted them to be, and contrast that to the corrupt people we have today, the dinosaurs who have been elected year after year, and fresh new blood of the people, the real people, can't get in. And it's just quite sad. So now he's going to go into the state governments. Is applicable to the state governments themselves. Why should the possibility that the national government might be under a like necessity in similar extremities be made an objection to its existence? It is not surprising that men who declare an attachment to the Union in the abstract should urge an objection to the proposed Constitution, what applies with tenfold weight to the plan for which they contend. So, attachment to the Union. Do you see this here? Now, if you raise the flag and wave it, leftists will call you a domestic terrorist. They get triggered at the flag. They hate the 4th of July. If you wear a flag on your shirt, they don't like you. But the flag represents an attachment to the Union and the states agreeing to obey the Constitution and the founding principles of the country. right? Property rights, freedom of speech, Second Amendment, right to privacy, like we don't have unreasonable search and seizure of your personal papers and stuff. Leftists, they don't really care about that anymore. The old school ones did. The new ones don't, you know. They're getting more cultural Marxists, right? They're becoming more socialists, national socialists. Very different. And what, as far as it has any foundation in truth, is an inevitable consequence of civil society, upon and a large scale. Who would not prefer that possibility to the unceasing agitations and frequent revolutions which are the continual scourges of petty republics? So here, he has a good point. Unceasing agitations. The media is really ratings driven, ad revenue. They want the money. All the corporate media is divisive and slanderous, whereas the YouTubers do way more better work as independent journalists. I'm telling you, honest, integrity, way better. Their YouTubers are not creating unceasing agitations. It's the corporate media, because they have such a heavy bias and they're such liars and they have such special interests and they're heavily editorial and fake, and they all live in a college echo chamber bubble and they're disconnected from the real people. These people create unceasing agitations. The New York Times, especially, Los Angeles Times, the Atlantic, CNN especially. It's just constant, let's just put a needle in everyone's back and drive it in, and let's anger the people and cause, all these drama. This is what's going to cause, revolutions. It's going to cause tensions. CNN is always like, every day is January 6th. Every day, like, they just go on and on and on and on. They're people, liberals, who have spent so much time away from reality and in a city, soft, cozy apartment bubble with luxury, that they have lost connections to the working class, to the really poor people who are more raw and real and just want the truth and facts and not all these opinion pieces. It's really quite interesting. So he says that, unceasing agitations and frequent revolutions are scourges of petty republics. Now, we've had agitation since, I'd say the 60s, but we haven't had the frequent revolutions part, even though our country was born from a revolution. But as Biden causes more and more disgust in the people, this is going to be a problem. Trump, the riots were insane. People don't want him. People love him, but the leftists hate him so much that it's going to cause problems for regular people. Protests on bridges, the burnings, the lootings, small businesses being afraid, putting up signs to like, oh, we support this particular group, please don't smash our business. Still getting smashed up, still getting looted. It's really quite scary. The police standing down and letting rioters destroy. People who go with weapons to defend their businesses being demonized by leftist media. So eventually you're going to have some type of revolution to where people are going to be tired of the chaos. So the leftists, during all Trump's administration, they went wild and they gained a lot of ground. They gained a lot of ground in media and creating a fake narrative, right? Letting one side slander Trump and create piñatas and go totally wild with the death threats and stuff like that. But then when Biden got in and he's empirically unable to do his job, and he pooped in his pants when he went to the Vatican, his son is a drug addict, he took showers with his daughter, and the diary was discovered that Project Veritas got. The FBI raided his home, and all those stories get suppressed by Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as misinformation when they are in fact true. So this is creating like, oh, you got to criticize Trump freely and openly, but when people do it to Biden, who has just as much reason because he's a corrupt person who's been in politics for over 20 years, now he's off limits. He's the golden boy when he's an embarrassment to the country. This gets people angry. So within these span of, since 2016 to right now, 2022, you're seeing the road be laid of the rules for thee, but not for me. Politicians closing down their businesses because of the lockdowns, but then going out. So the working people, when they saw Gavin Newsom, governor of California, go out to eat at the French Laundry with no mask on and hanging out while he closed businesses in California, then he invited all the undocumented immigrants here. Then he left them high to dry during the lockdowns, and then they were out of their jobs. They couldn't work. They were not able to get financial aid. But then the leftists said, we care about immigrants, but they abandoned them. And then taxpayers were like, there's over 7 million in California who are undocumented. How can you take our tax dollars when you close our businesses to feed these people? And this created tensions among the citizens and the non-citizens, and the working class versus the elites. Nancy Pelosi as well. She has a district in San Francisco, closed hair salons, but she went out to get her hair done with no mask on, right? Regardless of how you feel about masks, I'm wearing one now, right? But the fact that they don't practice what they preach. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she was talking smack about the restrictions being so free in Florida, but then she was in Miami, Florida, pictured with her boyfriend relaxing, eating, drinking alcohol, and not wearing a mask. You see, so she's enjoying the freedom in other states, but not the states that she runs. She locks everyone down. And there is also Cori Bush, who she wants to defund the police, but then has the taxpayers pay her private security, right? So you're like, the people are getting very angry at the politicians having separate rules for them, sucking off our money, defunding cops and not representing the people properly, right? There are some people who want defunded cops, but there's people who don't. And I want to be able to walk safely and not get mugged, and leftists want to take away your gun rights. Then they want to defund cops. So they're making it easier for a criminal to hurt you. Gavin Newsom released 60,000 inmates from the prisons because of the coup, right? And then people were very afraid because it's like there's no jobs during the lockdown. A criminal is going to resort to crime because he just got out and there ain't no jobs for him. So what are we going to do? Unemployment only lasts so long for certain people, and they're going to resort to crime. So they're making everything unsafe. High unemployment causes more crime. So the politicians were doing their jobs, but they're fine. They get to suck off of us while we get to kind of scramble and get together. So when he mentions frequent revolutions, there's steps to that, right? There's steps to it. And America is sadly headed that way, with echo chambers bubbling, censorship on one side opening up, and criminals being, told they can have free reign because if you steal less than $900, you don't get persecuted. Business owners saying, well, these leftist woke-tards are allowing people to just come and steal, like Safeway in California, Walgreens, Rite Aid, CVS, Target. They're just getting robbed all the time in broad daylight, and the security guards can't do anything because the law is still under 900, can't be prosecuted. And activist district attorneys letting people off the hook. And businesses are like, well, if I can't keep paying all this insurance and I can't keep losing all this capital, I'm going to leave. They leave. The tax bubble's smaller. The schools get less funded well. And then there's less money for the police force and firefighters. And then the communities come less safe, and then people leave. And then the people who can't afford to leave, who once lived in a good neighborhood, can't anymore because of these woke politics that were soft on crime and university brats who live in their own echo bubble and are out of touch with the raw reality. They have created another problem. And that is how a revolution happens, is when so many of the people are tired of their ineffectual politicians who lie and serve banks, foreign interests, and their private pockets. So a republic has to have proper representation. So if the politicians, they're hired to represent the people. But if the politicians don't even know their own people, and they're all doing it to go on private yachts, to go to galas, to be with celebrity actors, and they're just partying, having fun, while the working class the farmers, the regular common people are struggling, this is gonna, cause a big bubble, right? And then they're gonna have to figure out what happens. Do you do a revolution? What happens if the voting doesn't work and they can just mail things in and it's not accountable and they lose faith in elections? Well, this causes a problem when you have activist postal workers, when you have ballot dumping, when you have media censoring anyone who questions anything, and, big tech, who is mostly part of the liberal cartel, censoring any type of speech that goes against the narrative and the regime. This is going to cause more and more problems because people are going to be like, I can't speak, I can't work, I can't even, you won't let us gather in certain amounts of groups. This is how they pressurize the people, terrorize them, psychologically abuse them, and then that will cause these frequent outbursts, It's not just about riots, it's about people getting frustrated at the ineffectuality of their government. And then they'll hate the union and they won't have an attachment to it, which is exactly the opposite of what the founding fathers wanted. A healthy, unified, strong nation that cares about, keeping to the Constitution and keeping the people not hating their government. So it is quite interesting when you compare it. What do you think? And that's where the militia point he brought in comes in. If liberals don't even want cops, they're going to have a hard time with the private militia because they demonize militias, and the militias, unfortunately, have not been properly trained and taught within the Republican states. Where it's like, what does it mean to be a part of that? There isn't an educational program for that, and leftists just deem you a terrorist. And it's like, okay, we have two different worlds growing, right? Everyone's a terrorist, or there's the other side is neglecting their duty and honor culture in their state. So we're getting at a very interesting time period in American history, I'd say. Each 10 years we have something cool to look at. But this is a very interesting time period to be alive, I have to say. Let me know what you think. What do you think about Alexander Hamilton's perspective and how it can relate to modern issues?